Rhapsodised Audio presents Collected Verse of Lewis Essen, performed by Dennis Daly. Music by Percy Granger. Walking Song, performed by the Philadelphia Woodwind Quintet. Introduction. Thomas Lewis Buvalo Essen is best remembered today as a dramatist, in particular for his perceptive Shavian political comedy The Time Is Not Yet Right, which was first produced in Melbourne in 1912. However, he was also active as a journalist and poet, and in the latter role was a significant figure in the development of Australian verse from the humble bush ballad to more adventurous and personalised forms of poetic expression. Essen was born in Scotland in 1878, but moved as a young child to Melbourne. He attended the University of Melbourne between 1896 and 1901, but left without graduating. After a European trip in 1904, he returned to Melbourne and began pursuing a literary career in earnest. His first collection of poems, Bells and Bees, was published in 1910, and a second collection, Red Gums and Other Verses, in 1912. Although Essen published no further poetry collections, his verse continued to appear in magazines such as The Bulletin until the late 1920s. After suffering several years of ill health, Lewis Essen died in Sydney in 1943. Essen may be described as a journalist who wrote poetry, rather than as a mainstream poet in his own right. Included in his verse are not only bush ballads, such as Whaling Up the Lachlan, but also sombre meditations such as The Travail of Nature, monologues like Silenus to a Young Satyr, and thundering panegyrics like The Bazaar of Death. As a rule, Essen's poems are quite short, and despite occasional infelicities, display a tidy and accurate use of verbiage. Most of the poems in Bells and Bees are poetic portraits, in which the poet strives to probe the deeper meanings of classic icons of cultural expression. The shearer's lonely wife, the Afghan camel driver, and the Greek legendary figure Silenus are all presented, not merely as exotic personages, but rather as individual expressions of a widely variegated humanity. The final poem, Brogan's Lane, stands out as a piece of social commentary, a depiction of a disaffected corner of urban society, where all the characters are tainted with a common sense of helpless misery. In Red Gums and Other Verses, Essen was a little more adventurous. Not only are many of the poems longer than those of the preceding collection, but Essen also includes narrative in several verses. He also affirms his Australian roots in 4 poems in the vernacular, a style made famous shortly afterwards in the verse novels of C.J. Dennis. 2 of the poems, Back to Little Long and Jugger, are set in the gangland background from which C.J. Dennis's reformed hero, Bill, emerges. However, Essen's 2 inhabitants of that sleazy district, the blousy Reenie and the brutal Jugger, soon to be released from prison, have no aspirations to progress to a higher estate. In these, as in many of Essen's other poems, the protagonists are trapped in a confined and uncomfortable existence, from which death is the only release. However, the mood is often lightened by the inclusion of such verses as Caprice, which is a depiction of a dazzlingly beautiful summer's day on Sydney Harbour, where nature celebrates exultingly and there is not a cloud in the sky. Although Essen cannot be said to rank with his illustrious forebears, such as Henry Kendall, or the giants of Australian poetry who succeeded him, such as C.J. Brennan and Les Murray, the value of his contribution to the development of Australian verse is undeniable. Listeners are invited to enjoy these poetic evocations from an age when Australia was moving from a culture of colonial imitation to one of distinctive nationality.